Advertised as a Final Fantasy killer, Legend of Dragoon was a major part of my childhood. It hooked me in completely as a young lad, and it was actually one of the first games I completed pretty much fully. But does it live up to the memories that I have of it? Come with me as we go on a journey to Endinus, in the first of these RPG retrospectives. Legend of Dragoon isn't your typical JRPG. Sure, it follows the general kind of basis. It has your experience points, it has your random battles as you'd expect, but it also has some really kind of cool and unique changes to the standard formula. For starters, when doing standard attacks, you actually get this button prompt that comes up as your character runs in. It's like a little square that spins around down to meet another square, and you have to press X at the right time. Do that, and you start a combo system called additions. This lets you extend the attack into multiple different points. As you go on through using these additions, you actually start unlocking more. You also power up the ones that you use, and these additions effectively level up themselves as well. And then once you've leveled them all up, you actually get a secret final addition, which is really long, really hard to pull off, and really gives you a lot of power. These require a lot of skill, a lot of timing, and a lot of practice, because honestly it's something I really didn't have. Skill is something I really didn't have when I started playing this. It's probably one of the most fun and enjoyable methods of making a turn-based battle system into something more active and more, not really real-time, but kind of semi-real-time, because you have to actually engage with it. On top of that, it's not just a standard quick-time event, because it is effectively a quick-time event every time you do an attack, but it's not just press this button over and over again. You can't just kind of memorize it and just do it without thinking, because sometimes the enemies will counterattack, at which point you have to quickly switch to circle instead of pressing X. If you don't do that, your attack gets cut in half and you get damaged and get knocked back. So it's a really fun little mechanic that they added into the game, and really is one of the key standouts for the gameplay for Legend of Dragoon. Another big change that the developers at Sony made, and yes, this is made by Sony themselves, was the fact that the defend option, which is normally kind of pointless in RPGs, let's be honest. I mean, in Final Fantasy, when do you really ever use defend? In Legend of Dragoon, it actually has a reason for being there, because whenever you defend, you heal 10% of your HP. So that becomes part of the tactical thought in your process is, when should I defend to actually heal my characters? Oh, and as you perform additions, you also get spirit points, or SP. Whenever you reach to 100 SP or higher, you get to transform into a Dragoon, at least part of the way through the story once you've unlocked that ability. When you turn into a Dragoon, you get these awesome looking kind of new suits of armour, and you actually grow wings, which is amazing. Your characters start floating, and you get access to new attacks or attack combos, which work in a similar way, except that you kind of have a ring that spins around and you have to press X at the right time to power it up, and that gets you to additional attacks up to a maximum of 5, the fifth one of which has a really awesome looking explosion at the end of it. It's so impressive to watch. On top of that, you also get some really powerful spells, which can do a lot of damage at the start of the game. They become kind of irrelevant towards the end of the game as you power up your normal additions, but at the start of the game they're definitely your most powerful attacks. However, it does come at a cost. Your most powerful form at the start of the game is also your most vulnerable. Again, in this form you get access to powerful attacks and spells, but that's at a cost of not being able to use items or defend, effectively meaning that you can't heal yourself, and you also can't revive characters. So if you're using it unwisely, it can actually give you a game over. So again, there's a real strategic thought to how you have to play the game. And that's just another point in favour of The Legend of Dragoon. The balancing. Not once does the game feel too easy or too hard. Everything just feels like it should be. Everything is just right. I mean, There are the odd points where some of the boss fights you'll find one is rather easy, and then the very next one's going to be super hard. But it balances each other out to the point where it doesn't feel like a negative. It feels like progression. It feels like you've gone through the initial sub boss and now you're at the main boss of each section. It just works so well. In terms of story, you play as Dart, a young man who just got back from basically travelling the world trying to get revenge on the Black Monster who, when he was a child, killed his family and burnt down his village. As you arrive home to his newer home, you find that village is also in ruin. It's been attacked, burnt to the ground, razed completely, and your childhood best friend Shana has been kidnapped. Dart sets off to rescue her, setting in motion basically the events of the whole game that bring you into a civil war, a century-old blood feud, and the battle to save the world, because this is a JRPG. However, even though the premise is somewhat cliche, The Legend of Dragoon, in my opinion, handles it pretty perfectly. It makes you think you're in for the same old ride, but honestly, it starts throwing curveballs at you left and right. It takes the standard tropes, the standard cliches, and it turns and moulds them and twists them into this new storyline, a new take on these ideas, which I think it's a real testament to the writers. The translators didn't do a great job because the dialogue isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Some of the bits do feel a bit robotic, but to be honest, when you consider things like in Final Fantasy VII with the "this guy are sick," I would say it's probably on par, if not better, than what you'd expect from a translated JRPG in the 1990s and early 2000s. The game lasts with 4 discs, and I think one of the really good things about it is that it fits the length of the game and the length of the story. It doesn't. Nothing seems to drag on too much. The 4th chapter, the 4th disc, does lose its way a little bit, and that was one of most people's kind of biggest gripes with the game. But honestly, I don't think it's that bad. The first chapter really starts building up the action. You go through this civil war. There's a lot of subplots. Some really quite emotional moments in the war as well, as you'd expect from a war. The second and the third are kind of where the character building happens and where you start learning more about the backstory and the lore of the world. And then the 4th is where everything sort of... all the character arcs are basically finished. There's not much left for them to do other than just head straight for the end of the game. That's what kind of brings it down a little bit for most people, but it's a nice quick finish. It doesn't take too long, and the lore behind it all, and minus the slightly convoluted twisting at the end, it all just sort of seems to just work really quite well. The ending is a bit kind of... it's a bit convoluted, but it's not too bad. It doesn't bring the rest of the game down, in my opinion. There are some endings out there where you put through amazing storylines, get to the end, and it just ruins everything. This one doesn't. It just seems they could have done a bit more with it, but that doesn't take away from the rest of the storyline. The other thing that I really have to mention when looking at Legend of Dragoon is the music. This is, to be honest, it's probably my favourite soundtrack in a game outside of Silent Hill 2. And come fight me if you want, I love this soundtrack. Please don't come fight me. The general music in the towns is absolutely beautiful. It fits perfectly because the towns are this safe, calm place, and the composers did this wonderful job of kind of mellowing out the tone and making this beautiful, soothing piece of music, or pieces of music, for each town, which suit the town. They suit the theme of the town, the look of the town, but also create this really nice, serene environment where you feel calm, you feel safe, you feel like you have time to sit back and learn about the story and the history and the lore, and you have time to look around and explore. On the other hand, the battle music is really fast-paced. It's got some great synth tones mixed in with various different instruments like guitars and drums and things to make a feeling of pure excitement and adrenaline, and you just know that you're in for a fight. And especially when you get to the boss music, the way it just ramps up really high, it gives you that sense of almost dread that anything could go wrong at any moment. That's also the same when you're in kind of hostile, dangerous environments, because the overall soundtracks for those environments portray a sense of concern, a sense of worry, a sense of anything could be around the corner. Because one thing that happens in this game is some of the boss fights aren't telegraphed. For example, there's one bit when you're running through a volcano, and as you come around a corner, boom, boss comes out of nowhere. So that sense of anything could happen actually suits the game as well. However, it was Dart's theme that stuck with me completely, and to this day will still hold a place in my heart. It's so incredibly powerful. The heavy metal undertones mix brilliantly with the almost operatic synth music to create probably one of the most exhilarating and inspiring pieces of music I've ever heard in an RPG to this day, if not in a game in general to this day. Whenever it kicks in, it gives you a kick, it lifts you up again, it rejuvenates you, pushing you forward towards the end of this 4-disc epic. Overall, it's really hard to find something negative to say about this game. The storyline can be a bit cliche in times, but it throws your expectations straight out the window and digs its claws straight into your very soul. The lore, the history just makes you feel completely invested in the world. The characters are amazing, except for one, which is Miranda, who they could have done more with, to be honest. But all the rest of the characters are really well thought out, they're really well fleshed out, and you really start to care for them. It has probably the most realistic love story I've seen in a JRPG to this day, between Shana and Dart, in that neither of them... Well, Shana is not really... She's kind of concerned about the fact that she has feelings towards Dart. Dart hides his feelings because he can't deal with them, so he keeps treating Shana like a little sister, but over time it all grows together. It's such a realistic, such a natural growth between them. The gameplay is outstanding for the most part. The only real negative is that you have to collect, to get some of the kind of secret items and things, and one of the secret bosses, you have to collect all of these things called Stardust. Stardust is kind of it's the collectible of the game. The issue is, there's nothing to tell you where it is. So you end up running around just pressing X like a madman, in every location, just in case there happens to be one, and they are in some very strange locations. I'm pleased to say that, to me, The Legend of Dragoon has not only lived up to the memories that I have of it, but after going back to it, it's actually exceeded the memories that I have of it. If you're a fan of RPGs, I cannot recommend this game more. The storyline is great, except for the ending. Even with the ending, it's still a really good storyline. The gameplay, while based on traditional JRPG mechanics, it adds so much more to it to create this kind of unique mix of engaging combos, great kind of additional skills and things, and just really makes something unique. And the graphics, considering that it did come out at the end of the PlayStation's life cycle, it's not surprising that the backgrounds wouldn't look out of place as a pre-rendered background on an early PS2 game. The character models aren't great, they do look a bit dated, but let's be honest, graphics don't make a game, the storyline and the gameplay do, and that's where Legend of Dragoon really hits the mark, and even graphically it looks brilliant for its time. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and if you want to see more like this, then hit a like, share and subscribe, that would be really appreciated. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.